Hey, bonjour à tous. Hello, everyone. Here is our HP update for the month of May 2026. Pour la présentation, je m'exprimer en anglais, mais si vous avez des questions, veuillez les poser dans la langue de votre choix et nous y recontacterons pour vous fournir plus d'informations. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that Boxing Canada operates on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded lands of many Indigenous peoples. We aim to share our sport in the same spirit of respect and community that they share this land with us. At Boxing Canada, we strive to create a welcoming environment for all our athletes, coaches, and officials, and we try to support each other to improve and reach all of our mutual goals. Chez Box Canada, nous efforcerons de créer un environnement accueillant pour tous les athlètes, entraîneurs et officiels, et nous soutenons mutuellement pour progresser et atteindre nos objectifs. Today, we'll start with an overview of the national team programs and provide updates on our 2026 national team plan. We'll walk through some of our latest results and through each of our A, B, and C tours, a little bit on our U19s, and we'll have a little discussion around the upcoming 2026 Elite Nationals, specifically regarding registration and seeding, and we'll conclude with some reminders of upcoming dates. Our current focus is centered on the 2026 National Team Plan and the broader HP plan spanning 2025 through till 2032. Our critical list of priorities includes refining our categorization through our dashboard, centralization of programs, and ensuring robust support for both athletes and coaches. This also encompasses our selection processes for camps, tours, and athlete assistance program. Now, let's take just a second to review how we can qualify for the Olympics, because that's the question we get most often at the office. The pathway begins with being successful at your provincials. You can then attend a nationals, where results will be evaluated as explained in the NTP. Performance at U23 assessment camp and January elite camps will also be evaluated. So there's an opportunity to qualify for national team through both performance, demonstrated performance, and also assessment. All of those performances and assessments can be used to categorize athletes. At that point, categorized athletes will have opportunities to compete internationally based on where they are within the program, how high they're ranked. But participation internationally can start with your club. Don't wait for it to be selected by us. If your club or your province has an opportunity to go and do a tour to another country to compete, we strongly encourage this. We have C tours starting out with dual meets inside of Canada, where we have opportunities for our athletes to get their first major international competitions as a national team member on home soil, where we control all of the available constraints around competition, accommodation, food, and judging. We also have B tours, which are sub World Cup class tours, but very highly respected. And we hope shortly that World Boxing will be offering a limited number of world ranking points at these events. And of course, we have our A tours, which tend to be our world championships, our World Cups, and our major games. Once athletes have an international record, they can target participation in the Olympic qualification pathway. For the upcoming 2028 Olympics, the first part of that pathway is the opportunity to qualify directly into the Olympics through a top 2 performance at the World Championships. Then later on in the 2027 season, an opportunity to qualify for the Olympics at our North, Central, and South American Continental Qualifier. And then early in 2028, there will be 2 World Qualifiers. For the vast majority of weight categories, we anticipate that at each one of those events, it will be the top 2 athletes who are selected to go directly to the Olympics. However, depending on the weight category and depending on how many athletes from the host country have already qualified, it could be as many as 4 positions. Now let's look at some of the major themes over the next 2 years that lead up to the Olympics and how they fit into our long-term 2025 to 2032 plan. 2026 was all about preparing our athletes for selection. 2027 will focus on early selection to the Olympics and specifically focused on selection within our Continental Confederation. This is the easiest way to get selected to the Olympics. For other athletes not directly on Olympic selection pathway, 2027 becomes a year to take advantage of the top athletes chasing after selection. Our normally B-level athletes will have increased opportunity to move up and put pressure at the A level. Our C-level athletes should be focused on getting their first international bouts and trying to get onto B Tour events. And our U17, U19 athletes will have an opportunity to take advantage of the Continental Championships for their age group to test themselves and see how they measure up to their peers across the Americas. This will be a great first step in their campaign to be selected for the 2032 Olympics. Now let's take a look at some of the results from our national team. We talked a little bit last month about our results at the Brazil World Cup. They were just finishing up, but I wanted to review them a little bit here. We, of course, had a number of athletes who had top 8 and better results, which was absolutely fantastic. We want to thank everyone for their efforts, and I want to thank our 2 coaches who were out in Brazil, head coach Vincent and coach Ariane Fortin. The priority for selection for this event was given to athletes who had previously demonstrated top 8 success at either 2025 World Cups or 2025 World Championships. And then we also had athletes who were able to qualify in the top 3 at a Class B competition early in 2026. This standard of performance for attending World Cups is something that you will see continue for the rest of the quadrennium. We recently finished up 2 B Tour events. We'll highlight both Serbia and Eindhoven, which both happened in May. For those of you who are really into the national team program, you'll know that the event in Serbia had originally been scheduled to be taking place in Turkey. However, given some of the instability in the Middle East, we decided to not go to Turkey and instead pivot. Unfortunately, that meant that the Serbia and Eindhoven events were happening within sort of 2 weeks of each other. These 2 events provided vital opportunities for athletes to reach either a top 3 in performance or add on to their world rankings and prepare for larger events like the World Cup and major games coming up later this season. Selection for Eindhoven was finalized after the conclusion of the Brazil World Cup. And at Serbia, we of course had 2 athletes who finished in the top 8, and we had 1 athlete who finished in the medals. Congratulations to Amber Jane Wall. When we look at Eindhoven, we had quite a number of athletes who were able to finish in the top 8. I want to say notably to Owen Paquette, of course, representing the national team for the first time, Maxime Lassade, who went not just to top 8, but onto a medal, Mackenzie Wright, who had a top 8, Rachel Baudon, who had a top 8, and Maeva Montemilio, who also had a top 8. Oh, and Victoria Penny, not to forget about Victoria, who had a top 3 with a medal. I want to thank our coaches on that tour, Samir Almais and Daniel Bouchal. And looking onto our C pathway, we had the Battle of the Prairies event in early May, and that included not just the Battle of the Prairies, but then another competition the very next day against our friends from France at the Fiaco Cup. A tremendous opportunity for all of our athletes to get in some really high quality competition. And of course, the video from both of those events is available to watch on our YouTube page. I want to thank our coaches who were there, Dylan Martin and Emma Suttle, for the work that they did in Regina. And feedback from our athletes on tours is very important to us. We thank all the athletes for providing feedback, and we are trying hard to ensure that the optimum performance environment for all our athletes and coaches is maintained on each one of our tours. You can see by the graph here, we're doing pretty well. There's always room for improvement, but as long as we can keep all of our feedback sort of up in the 4 to 5 range, I think we're doing a pretty good job. Now let's look at some current and upcoming events. We currently have a U19 team in the Bornisa Memorial that's happening in Hungary. Athletes on this team will join another 10 boxers later in the season for U19 World Championships in Montenegro, which we'll talk about in a minute. We are currently in our second day of competition, and we have final results in from our first day of competition, where we had Mise, Polishchuk, and Suri Pafford, who are competing. Congratulations to Suri on her win, and we look forward to seeing many performances from this team over the next couple of days. I want to thank our coaches who are at that event, Jesse Pinheiro, Eve Fontaine, and Daniel Kahn. And leaving shortly will be our A team heading over to China for the next World Cup. They're currently training in Montreal in camp, and then they will be leaving and flying to China for an international camp with many other national teams, and then following with the actual World Cup, starting on about the 8th and running through until the 15th, I think, of June. Athletes were selected to this event based on their previous World Cup and B Tour performances. And of course, for the high level of competition that is a World Cup, we are focused on the ability to perform and not necessarily sending a full team. At that event, we will have our head coach, Vincent Auclair, and Ariane Fontaine. And looking to our C pathway, we have an upcoming dual meet against Mexico, courtesy of Devin Tomko, who is out of Selkirk, and he puts on a tremendous event, and we're really looking forward to being there. This will be a great opportunity for our athletes to compete in a high energy show environment and, of course, gain international experience, particularly around one of our competing national teams within this confederation. And I think this is especially important given that we have a continental championship coming up later this year. And of course, we'll be competing directly against the Mexicans for positions to go direct selection to the Olympics later in 2027. We will have Coach Dylan Martin and someone else. I can't remember who it is that we're sending out there, unfortunately, but I know it's coming. And final selections for these athletes are being made right now. So we don't have anything to announce because we just got the list from the Mexicans, and we want to make sure that we're matching up our athletes. But look for a post on the website about that shortly. Our U17s, a little later in the summer, will have an opportunity to represent the national team in Kansas City. Selection is primarily based on this, of course, for the gold and silver medalists from the U19 and U17 national championships. Sorry, U17 national championships. Final details on the tour are just being made right now, and formal invitations will be sent out shortly. But we're looking forward to getting a good group of U17s out there because, of course, we know that we will have a U17 continental championships and U19 continental championships next season in 2027. And this season, we will have our U19 World Championships. So we are still working on some of the details as we get information in from World Boxing. It's important to note that participation on this event will conflict with some major provincial championships in October. We strongly encourage PTSOs to write their selection criteria such that any athlete who attends the U19 World Championships is automatically granted the equivalent to first place for the purpose of their provincial selection. This doesn't mean that they are provincial champions, only that they have tied with the 2026 champion for the purpose of selection to upcoming events. I also want to say we had planned originally on having a camp in Montreal before heading over to Montenegro. However, it's looking like with the dates that have been provided to us, this is going to be a relatively long tour, and we are cognizant that a number of these athletes will be in school and that taking additional time in order to do a training camp for a week in Montreal would put a significant burden on their education. So at this point, we are not planning on doing that. We're planning a direct entry into Montenegro. And I think our last highlighted event for this year is the 2026 Youth Olympic Games, and that will be happening in Dakar. Very excited about this. The Youth Olympic Games doesn't come up very often. We were only granted 2 start spots, and we had a team at the qualification event in Thailand. We had a full 7 athletes who were over there, but the IOC granted Canada start spots in just the women's 51 and men's 55. So congratulations to Lissandro and to Marine for their naming to that team. We have just received a whole bunch of information from Dakar that we're sorting through. I think one of the big takeaways is bug nets, because it's going to be hot and there are going to be a lot of mosquitoes around. But we're very much looking forward to having the team over there. Important to understand also, we were only given a single coach position for this tour. So it will be Coach Brad Ross, who's been working with our youth and our junior teams for the last couple of years. And a final slide to just sort of review all of the upcoming dates. The one or the 2 on here that we haven't talked about yet with regards to tours are the Melee Gala, and that's happening in Winnipeg. It's a C-level dual event, dual meet against the Americans. We're currently trying to work with the Americans to find out which weight classes they're going to send up, but they're very focused on sending a high quality team, and we want, of course, to be able to meet them in that challenge. And then also our continental championships. We know it's happening in Mexico. We're very much looking forward to doing that. This will be the highlight of the year. We're just waiting for a few more bits of information, particularly around the pre-camp that we're going to look to do, because that pre-camp will be important because we suspect that the venue is going to be at altitude. So we're going to have to do something in order to be prepared. But that will be, of course, an A-level tour for our elite categories. And now just a little bit about our elite national championships scheduled for Cape Breton in November. I said this last month, and I just want to make sure that we're clear on this. Entries. So each province and territory may register their athlete if they were the winner of that category in the 2025 Elite Nationals in that weight class. So if you were the winner in, let's say, men's 80, but now you're competing in men's 90, that does not count. You have to be going back to the same category. They may also enter their 2026 U23 champion in the same weight class. And same rules apply. No switching weight classes there. They also then get 2 regular entries per weight class based on whatever criteria the PTSO wishes to use. And then they will be given an additional or up to 10 male and 10 female wildcard entries. Those wildcard entries can be used as the province feels fit, but they are subject to available space. And we're going to be asking each of those wildcard entries to be numbered so that we can get your top wildcard entry in ahead of your second, ahead of your third, ahead of your fourth, ahead of your fifth. Because there will be some weight categories that we suspect will fill quite quickly, particularly men's 55, men's 60, men's 65. Seeding for the event, we're going to have first seed assigned to last year's champion. Must be the same weight category, of course. Then the next seed will go to the runner-up from last year so that they do not meet each other in the first or second rounds. And then we will have a third seed available for a U23 champion in the same weight category. Then we're going to do another little modification on one of my favorite things, which is looking at how we do draws and seeding athletes. And we are going to ask that provinces seed their 2 regular entries as number 1 and number 2. So we will take all the provincially identified number 1s, we will randomize them and then put them in sequential order into the brackets. And then we will take regular entry number 2 and put them into the bracket. Then we will do a third big grouping, which is all of the wildcard entries will appear at the bracket at the end of that group. And the idea there is to try to privilege athletes who are not wildcards, right? If you're a wildcard, you're an extra entry, and we want to make sure that you have the opportunity to participate. But what we don't want to end up having is every single athlete from one province showing up, within the order of the draw, sort of as 1, 2, 3, 4, potentially down. If you had last year's champion, last year's runner-up, and the U23 champion, you could potentially be down to the top 5 athletes, even top 6 athletes, all being from the same province. And we don't want that to happen. So we will be spreading people through there. Now, with the draws, we of course learn some lessons as we go on this. And in the event of a withdrawal of an athlete after the draw, but before the technical meeting, the category will be redrawn at the technical meeting. The redraw will fit in within existing spaces within the schedule, so we don't expect the schedule will change. But the names attached to certain bouts might move around because of the redraw. In the event of withdrawal of an athlete after the technical meeting, redraws will be conducted subject to the decision of the TD. And if a category doesn't happen on the first day, then I would suggest maybe there's more of an opportunity to redraw. But if the category happens the very next day, I think it would be unusual that we would do a redraw. And a reminder on withdrawals. So as with the last couple national championships, any withdrawal after the draw has happened will be subject to a $200 scratch fee. If you are interested in competing, compete. If you are not interested in competing, please do not put yourself into the draw. Okay, that came out kind of harsh, but that's what we're trying to do. Okay, and to wrap up, so our next HP update will be June 24th and 25th. We'll have results from China. We'll have results from the U19s. We'll have more information on the U19 World Championships. We should have a full amount of information on who's going to be in Selkirk for the dual meet. A bunch of information on continentals, including who will be selected for continentals, because that selection will be finalized after World Cup in China. And heads up, but I think I forgot to put in, or we have a U23 camp, our U23 assessment camp, which is scheduled for September 10th through 16th. The national team program document has an explanation on who is going to be invited to that, and those invitations will be going out via email directly to those athletes. and to their province. And if we've got home coach emails attached to those names, to the home coach email addresses as well. And those will be going out next week. So we're looking forward to that. That camp is always a lot of athletes. I think we had just about 70 last year and a lot of coaches. And it's a great time. It happens at the National Training Center in Montreal. Okay, and that's our wrap up. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate. Give me a call, give me an email. And reminder that we do have live meetings of this available both tomorrow and on Friday. So should you have a desire to ask any questions live, that opportunity exists for you. All right. Have yourself a great day.